Before we start, if you enjoy the story, please leave a like and check if you're subscribed. Pain arrived before consciousness, white-hot through Jace Torrens' left leg. His first breath tasted of smoke and coolant, his second of blood. The fighter's cockpit had collapsed around him, jagged metal pressing close. Emergency lights pulsed dying red against twisted bulkheads. The main display flickered. Hull integrity compromised, life support failing, navigation core shattered. His leg was pinned beneath the control console at an angle that grayed his vision. Outside the fractured canopy, alien jungle pressed close, all bioluminescent vines and violet shadow. Velith 9, Cathara space. 3 centuries of shoot-on-sight policy, and he'd just crashed through their front door. The distress beacon chirped its automated melody. Here it meant execution. Jace reached for the override switch, but the panel was dead. The beacon would keep singing until someone came to silence it permanently. He tried to free his leg, gritting teeth against grinding agony, but the metal wouldn't budge. Blood soaked through his flight suit, warm and slick. Minutes before shock decided for him. The jungle canopy shifted. Jace went still, hand closing on his sidearm. Movement, deliberate and silent, threading through branches. He tracked the disturbance, pulse hammering. She dropped from the trees 20 meters out, landing without sound. Jace's breath caught. The Cathara rose slowly. Teal skin shifted in depth as she moved, marked with geometric patterns glowing soft amber. Her eyes fixed on the wreckage, on him, vertical pupils contracting to slits. She wore minimal armor, dark leather and bone, revealing how those golden patterns flowed down her shoulders. Thick tendrils cascaded from her head, wrapped with metal and beads. A tail moved behind her, sinuous and expressive. She carried a weapon shaped to her 4-fingered grip. Jace raised his sidearm, the gesture pathetic and defiant equally. She could have killed him already. Her head tilted, tendrils shifting. When she spoke, her voice carried precise formality. "You are human." Not a question, an indictment. "I am," Jace said, keeping his voice steady. "Navigation failed. Equipment malfunction. I didn't know where I'd drop out of hyperspace until too late." "You are human. Protocol is clear." She raised her weapon, the barrel aligned with his forehead. Jace didn't beg. Instead, he looked past her, scanning the jungle edge where undergrowth trembled. "You've got company," he said quietly. 40 meters, 10 o'clock. Something big moving through the thorns. Her patterns flickered. "Distraction will not—" "I'm pinned in a metal coffin bleeding out," Jace interrupted. "Where am I running? But that thing doesn't care about protocol. It cares that we're bleeding and trapped in its territory." Her eyes narrowed, but her head turned fractionally. Her tail went rigid. For 3 heartbeats, nothing moved. Then the undergrowth exploded. The creature came low and fast, all muscle and serrated chitin, 8 legs propelling it forward. The Cathara moved, but the predator was already close. Jace fired through the canopy gap, his sidearms report sharp. The shot took the creature in its cluster of eyes, redirecting its momentum. It slammed into the wreckage, mandibles screeching against metal. Jace felt the impact through his trapped leg and bit down on a scream. The predator recoiled, ichor streaming, and the Cathara was there, blade drawn in one fluid motion. She moved impossibly fast, strikes surgical. The creature thrashed, but she anticipated every movement, rolling beneath a claw swipe to drive her blade up through the soft joint beneath its jaw. It shuddered and collapsed. Silence crashed back over the jungle. The Cathara stood over the corpse, blade dripping, her patterns glowing brighter now, golden light chasing across her skin in waves. When she turned back to him, her expression was unreadable. She approached, movements cautious, weapon lowered. Her eyes tracked from his trapped leg to his face, lingering on the blood soaking his suit. "You saw it before I did." "Your patterns changed," Jace replied, voice tight with pain. "Right before it charged. Figured if you were about to kill me, you wouldn't bother getting tense about something behind you." Her tail twitched. She stood there, some internal calculation playing out. Then she holstered her weapon and moved to the console, pinning his leg. "Do not interpret this as mercy." "Wouldn't dream of it." She braced against the metal, tendons standing out as she lifted. Jace gritted his teeth and pulled himself free, legs screaming protest. vision grayed at the edges. When he could focus again, she was binding his leg with something from her harness, movements efficient and impersonal. A transmission crackled through her comm unit, harsh syllables in a language Jace didn't recognize. Her patterns dimmed, then flared bright again. She responded, tone carefully neutral. When she looked at him again, something had changed in her expression. "You are to be interrogated. High Commander Zethira believes your crash may indicate larger human incursion. You will be transported to the outpost for questioning." She produced energy cuffs, thin bands that hummed with contained force. When they closed around his wrists, they pulled tight enough to ache. "Can you walk?" Jace tested weight on the injured leg and nearly blacked out. "Define walk." Without asking, she ducked under his arm, taking most of his weight with disturbing ease. Her skin was warm against his side, warmer than human baseline. Her patterns pulsed faintly where they made contact, as though responding to his presence. "The outpost is 12 kilometers. We move now or the scavengers will find us before dawn." Jace had no choice but to match her pace, each step fresh negotiation with agony. The jungle swallowed them, bioluminescent flora casting everything in shades of violet and green. His distress beacon song faded behind them, dying as the fighter's power gave out. They walked in silence for 2 hours before his leg gave out entirely. He collapsed against a massive root system, breath coming in gasps, cold sweat soaking through his undershirt. The Cathara stood over him, tail lashing. "I cannot carry you the full distance." "Then leave me." Jace's vision swam. "You've got your orders. I'm interrogated or dead. Either way, your duty's covered." Her patterns flickered through several colors he couldn't interpret. She looked back the way they'd come, then ahead into darkening jungle. Her hand moved to her weapon, and for a moment Jace thought she might finish what protocol demanded. Instead, she crouched beside him, examining his makeshift bandage. Blood had soaked through. She made a sound low in her throat and began unpacking medical supplies. "There are ruins nearby. We shelter until dawn. You will not survive exposure and blood loss both." "Awful kind of you." "This is not kindness. You have intelligence value, nothing more." But her hands were gentle as she cleaned and rebound his wound. And when she helped him to his feet again, her grip steadied him longer than strictly necessary. The ruins emerged from jungle growth like broken teeth, ancient stone carved with symbols neither human nor Cathara. She cleared a space in what had once been a sanctum, the ceiling open to stars Jace didn't recognize. She built no fire but activated a small heating unit that cast them both in pale blue glow. Jace slumped against the wall, exhaustion dragging him under despite the danger. Fever had begun to build behind his eyes, his body's response to injury and shock. He should have been terrified, should have been planning escape. Instead, he watched the Cathara take position across from him, her weapon in reach, her attention split between him and the jungle beyond. Her patterns had settled to soft amber again, pulsing in slow rhythm, almost peaceful. In his delirium, words escaped without permission. "I'm sorry, Ren. Should have checked the target myself, should have questioned the orders." More names followed, fragments of missions and faces he couldn't forget. The Cathara's head lifted, her eyes fixing on him with something that might have been curiosity. The last thing Jace saw before unconsciousness claimed him was golden light in the darkness, patterns shifting like a question he couldn't answer. Dawn came with engines overhead. Jace woke to Ixara's hand on his shoulder, her patterns dim in gray light. The fever had broken. "Transport arrives in 10 minutes. Can you stand?" He could, barely. The energy cuffs hummed against his wrists as he found his balance. The transport was military-grade and efficient. Guards flanked the ramp, their patterns flaring hostile crimson. One spat something that made Ixara's tail snap rigid. She responded in clipped Cathara, tone brooking no argument. Inside, Jace was secured to a bench. Ixara sat across from him, weapon ready, eyes forward, professional distance reimposed. The flight took an hour over violet forests and jagged mountains. The outpost emerged from rock like organic growth, all flowing lines and bioluminescence. They landed on a carved platform where more guards waited. The interrogation room was bare except for restraints and a pulsing wall panel. They secured him standing, arms spread, designed to exhaust over time. The first officer was older, patterns faded, tendrils wrapped in rank metals. "You will tell us why you came." "Navigation failure. I was surveying neutral space when my system glitched." Humans do not wander into forbidden space by accident. This one did. Hours passed, same questions, different phrasing, waiting for inconsistency. Jace kept answers simple because truth was the only sustainable story. His legs screamed, shoulders burned, but he'd endured worse. The second interrogator was younger, male, patterns aggressive scarlet. He didn't ask questions. Pain lanced through the restraints, conducting through Jace's nervous system like fire. He bit down hard but didn't scream. "You will tell us about the invasion fleet." "There is no fleet. I was alone." More pain, longer. Jace's vision whited out. Through the roaring, he heard the door open, raised Cathara voices. The pain cut off. "Not sanctioned methods, Vorak. The High Commander wants answers, not excuses. She ordered questioning, not torture. There is a difference." Jace forced his eyes open. The scarlet Cathara Vorak faced Ixara in the doorway. "You defend the human." "I defend protocol," Ixara replied, patterns flickering amber to gold. "This serves no strategic purpose." "Perhaps you were contaminated during transport. Time alone breeds sympathy." "Time alone breeds understanding of his tactical value. He has not broken, which suggests training or truth. Both are useful. Pain only obscures which." Vorak's tail lashed, but he stepped back. "The High Commander arrives within the hour. She will determine his value." He left, shouldering past Ixara. When the door sealed, she deactivated the restraints. Jace collapsed forward, but she caught him, supporting his weight until circulation returned. "Why?" "Vorak Shen seeks war. To him, you represent only vengeance, but vengeance does not serve survival." "And you do?" Her eyes met his, amber and unreadable. She left him in a holding cell with water and food. His hands shook as he ate. He was still eating when alarms shattered the quiet. Emergency lighting flooded corridors crimson. Through the window he saw guards running, heard weapons fire. The cell door hissed open. Ixara stood there, armor scorched, weapon drawn. "Come." "What's happening?" "Coup." Vorak's faction moved against the High Commander. "They're killing loyalists and anyone who questioned their methods. That includes us both." Jace followed her into chaos, smoke, bodies, energy weapons echoing off stone. Ixara moved with predatory grace. She thrust a sidearm into his hands. "They're jamming communications, framing us as collaborators. We need to reach a working transmitter and send evidence of what's really happening." She tapped a device on her harness. "Security logs. Vorak planning this with his lieutenants, but we need transmission capability." They fought through 2 ambushes, her precision and his adaptability creating brutal efficiency. Jace took a graze across his ribs that burned, but they kept moving. At the vehicle bay, Ixara went for a small reconnaissance craft, 2-seat and maneuverable. "You can fly this? Can you?" He grinned. "Guess we'll find out together." She took pilot position, 4-fingered hands dancing across controls. Behind them, bay doors began closing. "Hold on." They screamed through the narrowing gap, barrel rolling past fire. The mountain fell away and they were over forest, flying low enough that branches whipped the canopy. 3 craft pursued. Ixara flew like she fought, precise but wild when necessary. She threaded between rock formations, used terrain to break sensor locks. Jace worked defensive systems, deflecting shots, warning her of attack vectors. They lost pursuit in a canyon system too narrow for larger craft. When they set down in a hidden gorge, silence felt unnatural. Ixara climbed out first, weapon ready, then pulled emergency supplies. Jace moved carefully around the burn across his ribs. She glanced at the wound, patterns flickering. "You're injured?" "So are you." For now, she activated a heating unit, blue glow casting shadows. Above them, 3 moons rose. They sat across the small fire, exhaustion catching them both. "Tell me about the war, your version." Ixara's tail coiled around her legs. "You know the history." "I know propaganda. Humans arrived seeking partnership. Cathara attacked without provocation. We defended ourselves." "We remember differently. Humans arrived seeking labor, built colonies on sacred grounds, poisoned water systems. When we protested, they called us primitive. When we fought back, they called us animals. By the time the war ended, an entire generation had learned to fear your ships the way prey fears predators. Jace was silent. I was taught Cathara felt no real emotion, that your culture was cold logic and any displays were manipulation. Her patterns flared gold. We are taught humans feel too much and think too little, that emotions make you chaotic, untrustworthy, that love and loyalty are weaknesses you exploit. Both sides teaching the other isn't quite people. Both sides ensuring the killing continues without guilt. The fire crackled. Jace's body screamed for rest he couldn't afford, but Ixara's honesty deserved reciprocation. I killed Cathara during service, border patrol, escort missions, clean engagements we were told, strategic necessity. I didn't question orders until I had reason to. What reason? He told her about the bombing mission, the facility that was supposed to be weapons manufacturing, the civilian workers who died because intelligence was faulty or didn't matter to command, about Ren trying to abort, about orders overriding conscience. When he finished, Ixara watched him with something new, understanding. I have executed humans at the border 3 times, quick, efficient. Protocol demanded it, and I never questioned. Until yesterday when you warned me about the predator, when you could have let it kill me and escaped, but chose cooperation. You were already helping me. Seemed fair. Fairness is not a Cathara value. Survival is, honor is, but fairness between enemies, her head tilted. That is new. Jace's hand moved before conscious thought, reaching to examine the scorch mark on her shoulder armor. His fingers brushed skin where leather had burned away, and her patterns exploded in golden light, cascading across her shoulders and arms in waves that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. They both froze. Her eyes were wide, pupils dilated, nearly circular. Her tendrils had shifted forward unconsciously, trembling. Her breathing had changed, quicker and shallower. I apologize, she said, voice strained. I did not mean this is... Hey, Jace withdrew his hand slowly. It's okay, we're both running on fumes and adrenaline. We should rest. She nodded, but her patterns took minutes to fade back to amber, and even then they pulsed brighter than before. They set watch rotations, but when Jace woke for his shift, he found her still awake, staring at the moons. Tomorrow they would run again. Tonight, something between them had shifted, and neither could pretend otherwise. Days blurred into survival rhythm. They moved at dawn, rested during midday heat, traveled at dusk. Vorax hunters tracked them relentlessly, but between the danger something else grew. Jace learned to read Ixara's patterns. Amber meant calm, gold signaled alertness, deep bronze showed fatigue she'd never admit. Her tail spoke volumes, rigid when threatened, loose when relaxed, curling slightly when she was thinking. He found himself watching for these tells, understanding her through observation rather than words. Ixara noticed, and she began watching him in return. She learned the tilt of his head when calculating odds, the way his hands moved through equipment checks, even under pressure, the set of his shoulders when old guilt surfaced. She caught herself mirroring his gestures without thought, as though proximity was teaching her body a new language. They didn't discuss what had happened by the fire, but the awareness sat between them, patient and inevitable. On the 4th day, they found the research facility. It emerged from forest like a scar, abandoned but intact. Overgrowth covered the structure, but the entrance remained accessible. Jace checked for power signatures while Ixara secured the perimeter. Nothing active, but backup systems might have archived data. Why would we need archives? Because Vorak framed us too perfectly. He knew exactly what accusations would stick. Maybe there's something here that explains why. Inside, dust covered everything, but terminals remained functional on emergency power. Jace accessed the main database while Ixara stood watch, tail twitching uneasily. The files painted a picture neither wanted to see. Corporate communications discussing Cathara labor as resource optimization. Strategic memos recommending aggressive cultural conditioning to prevent organized resistance. Incident reports. Human security firing on Cathara civilians, then falsifying records to justify violence. And buried deeper, evidence of Cathara extremist factions bombing human settlements that showed willingness to negotiate, acts designed to eliminate moderates on both sides. They weaponized us against each other, Jace said, voice hollow. Corporate interests and extremists on both sides. Anyone advocating peace became a target. Ixara's patterns had gone dark, almost black. My training instructors, the histories they taught, all built on partial truths designed to keep us isolated and afraid. She turned to face him, and for the first time since they'd met, her control fractured completely. Her patterns cascaded through colors he'd never seen, grief and rage and betrayal. Her tendrils curled inward, a gesture of pain. I executed humans based on these lies, 3 people who might have been like you, who might have been trying to survive, trying to understand. Stop! Jace crossed the space between them, close enough to feel heat radiating from her skin. I bombed a facility based on the same lies, killed people who were just working, just living. We were both used, both shaped into weapons by people who profited from our hatred. How do we live with that? By being better than what they made us. Her eyes met his, pupils wide and dark. I do not know how to be anything else. You're already something else. You stopped Vorak's torture. You saved me from the coup. You listened when I told you my version of the war. He paused. That's not the soldier they trained you to be. It is not. They downloaded the evidence onto Ixara's data device, proof that might convince others if they could transmit it. When they emerged, the sun was setting, painting the sky in colors neither of their worlds possessed. They made camp in a clearing, the facility visible behind them like a monument to old mistakes. Jace's ribs had stopped aching, his leg almost back to full strength. Ixara's burns were healing, patterns brighter than they'd been since the coup. She sat closer than previous nights, close enough that he could feel warmth rolling off her skin. Tell me about Earth, she said suddenly. Not the war, just what it was like. He smiled despite everything. Overcrowded, polluted in places, but there were still wild spaces, oceans so deep nobody's mapped the bottom, mountains that take days to climb. I spent a year in Montana before enlisting, working construction and hiking on weekends. Sky so big it made you feel small in a good way. We have no oceans on Velith 9, only rivers and lakes, but the mountain ranges in the southern continent are supposed to be beautiful. I have never seen them. Sentinels are not encouraged to travel for pleasure. Why not? Because attachment to places breeds desire to protect them. Desire breeds emotion. Emotion breeds. She stopped, patterns flickering gold. It's what? Weakness, but she said it like she no longer believed it. Jace shifted position and winced as movement pulled at his ribs. Ixara noticed immediately, training overriding hesitation. She moved behind him, fingers finding the edges of the burn. This should be treated properly. It's fine. It is not fine. You favor your left side. The tissue is not healing correctly. She had medical supplies from the facility. Her hands worked with professional efficiency, cleaning and rebinding the wound, but her touch was gentler than necessary. When she finished, her hands remained on his shoulders as though she'd forgotten to move them. Jace turned his head enough to see her face. Her patterns were pulsing slowly, gold and amber mixing. Her tendrils had shifted forward, close enough to see the delicate metalwork woven through them. Ixara. Yes? What are your patterns saying right now? She was quiet for a long moment. They are saying I am compromised, that my training has failed, that everything I was taught about emotional discipline was insufficient preparation for you. His hand found hers where it rested on his shoulder. Her skin was warmer than his, textured differently, but her fingers curled around his with the same hesitant certainty he felt. The feeling's mutual. She moved around to face him, and for the first time there was no professional distance, no tactical positioning. She knelt close enough that her tendrils brushed his face, feather-light and curious. Her tail curved around his wrist, impossibly intimate. This is not how Kthara bond. We do not. Your mouth customs are alien to us. Show me yours. She leaned forward slowly. Her forehead touched his, warm and solid, and her patterns blazed bright enough to light the clearing. Her hands cupped his face, thumbs brushing his cheekbones. Her tail tightened around his wrist, and he realized he could feel her pulse through it, racing as fast as his own. They stayed like that, breathing the same air until her tendrils curled forward fully, brushing against his temples in a gesture that made her entire body shudder. When he raised his free hand to cradle the back of her head, careful of the tendrils, her patterns exploded in cascades of gold and white, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. "I can feel you," she whispered. "Your warmth, your pulse. This is how we know we are not alone." He kissed her forehead where it pressed against his, the gesture instinctive and tender. She made a sound low in her throat, something between a gasp and a sigh, and pulled him closer. They held each other as the moons rose, learning a new language through touch and trust. When they finally separated, her patterns remained bright, and neither could look away. The ground shook without warning. Jace grabbed his weapon as Ixara spun toward the sound. Through the trees, lights appeared, multiple craft, searchlights sweeping the forest. Vorax hunters had found them. "Run," Ixara commanded, already moving. They fled through darkness, branches whipping past, engine sounds growing closer. The forest gave way to canyon edge without warning, a chasm dropping away into shadow. Behind them, hunters crashed through undergrowth. "Across," Ixara said, pointing to a fallen tree bridging the gap. Jace went first, testing the ancient wood. It held. Halfway across, energy fire split the air, hitting the canyon wall above them. Rock shattered, chunks tumbling down. "Go," Ixara shouted, but she was still on the near side. More fire. The tree groaned. Jace made it across and turned back as Ixara started forward. The tree shifted under her weight, decades of rot finally failing. She leaped, fingers catching the edge, and Jace lunged to grab her arm. Their eyes met for one moment, then the rock face crumbled. She fell with the debris, tail whipping for purchase, patterns blazing like a dying star. Jace screamed her name, but the canyon swallowed it, swallowed her, swallowed everything but the sound of his own ragged breathing. The hunter's lights swept toward him. He had seconds to decide, stay and die or run and hope she'd survived. He ran, grief tearing him apart with every step, her name still burning in his throat. Ixara woke to pain and darkness. Her left arm was broken, ribs cracked, but her legs still worked. She'd caught an outcropping 15 meters down, her tail saving her from the full drop. Above, light swept the canyon rim, searching for bodies. She didn't call out. If Jace had survived, he'd run. If he died, her voice would only draw execution. She waited until the lights moved on, then began climbing one-handed, claws finding purchase in stone, every movement agony. It took 3 hours to reach the top. The hunters were gone, tracks leading away from the canyon, and among them, human boot prints, running hard toward the northeast. Toward the relay station. Her patterns flared bright despite exhaustion. He was alive, and he was trying to finish what they'd started. Every step was fire through broken ribs. Her arm hung useless, but her weapon hand remained steady. She tracked him through the night, reading signs no human would think to hide. Disturbed moss, broken branches, the distinctive pattern of his gait favoring the left leg. He was moving fast, but not carelessly, still thinking tactically, even alone. She found his first ambush site at dawn. 2 hunters dead, killed with precision and minimal ammunition expenditure. Further on, another site. He was thinning their numbers, but there were too many. He couldn't reach the relay alone. He wouldn't have to. The relay station rose from a hilltop, a communication tower surrounded by prefabricated structures. Ixara approached from the east using high ground to survey the situation. Vorax forces had arrived first, at least 20 fighters forming a perimeter. And inside that perimeter, energy fire flashed sporadically. Jace had made it inside. He was pinned but fighting. She checked her weapon. Low on ammunition. Her arm was useless, her body damaged. Tactically, attempting rescue was suicide. Any rational assessment said retreat, regroup, survive to fight when odds improved. She moved down the hill toward the station. The first sentry never saw her coming. She killed him silently, took his ammunition, and kept moving. The second heard her approach and turned, but her blade was already in motion. She fought through the perimeter like she'd been taught, each strike economical and lethal. But pain slowed her, and numbers overwhelmed training. A shot took her in the shoulder, spinning her around. She went down hard, weapons skittering away. 2 hunters advanced, patterns blazing hostile crimson. One raised his weapon for the killing shot. The shot never came. Jace erupted from the station entrance, covering fire, dropping both hunters before they could react. He reached Ixara in seconds, hands finding her injuries with desperate efficiency. "You're alive," he said, and his voice broke on the words, "You fell, I thought." Later, she grabbed his collar with her good hand, patterns pulsing gold through the pain. "The upload?" 70% complete, but they'll breach the station before it finishes. Then we buy time. He pulled her to her feet, supporting her weight as they retreated to the station. Inside, the relay equipment hummed, data streaming toward orbit where it would scatter to every Cathara military channel. The evidence would reach High Commander Zathira, would reach the Council, would reach everyone Vorak had tried to silence. If they could hold for 6 more minutes. Jace fortified the entrance while Ixara checked the rear access. They had limited ammunition, limited cover, and Vorak's forces regrouping for a coordinated assault. She met Jace's eyes across the small space and saw the same calculation she'd made. They probably wouldn't survive this. He smiled anyway. Hell of a last stand. There are worse ways to die. Yeah? He moved close enough to press his forehead to hers briefly, the gesture achingly familiar now. Can't think of better company for it. The assault came hard and coordinated. Energy fire tore through walls, forcing them deeper into the station. Jace held the main entrance while Ixara covered the rear, each shot counting because they had so few left. Time stretched and compressed, measured in percentages on the upload display. 85% 90. The front wall exploded inward. Through the smoke and debris, Vorak stepped inside, his scarlet patterns blazing bright enough to hurt. Behind him, a dozen fighters moved to flank positions. "Surrender the human," Vorak commanded, weapon trained on Jace. "You can still be saved, Vishen. This contamination can be cleansed. Return to your people." Ixara stepped between Vorak's weapon and Jace, her patterns shifting through colors, amber to gold to something he'd never seen before, white-blue like lightning. Her tail rose behind her, fully extended in a display of challenge. "He is my people." Vorak's patterns flared darker. "You invoke the bond oath for a human?" "I invoke it now before witnesses, as is my right under ancestral law." Her voice carried the formal cadence of ritual, each syllable precise. "I name Jace Torin as my chosen bond. His life is my life, his fate is my fate. To strike him is to strike me. This I declare by blood and pattern." Silence crashed through the station. The fighters behind Vorak shifted uneasily. The bond oath was ancient, predating the Dominion itself, and to violate it meant violating the very foundation of Cathara tradition. Vorak's tail lashed. "You would throw away 3 centuries of isolation for this? Our people died to keep humans away from our world, and you offer 1-year bond?" "Our people died because corporations and extremists weaponized fear on both sides," Ixara replied. "The evidence transmitting to the High Commander proves it. Your coup proves it. You do not fight for Cathara survival. You fight to maintain the lie that keeps you in power." "The lie that kept us safe. The lie that kept us alone." Her voice softened. "I have seen what you refuse to see, Vorak. Not all humans are the enemy. Not all isolation is safety. We can be better than what they made us." The upload display hit 99%. Vorak's eyes flicked to it, understanding dawning. His weapon swung toward the relay equipment. Jace fired first. The shot took Vorak in the shoulder, spinning him away from the console. Vorak returned fire even as he fell, the bolt intended for Jace but striking wild as he moved. Ixara felt the impact before she registered the pain. Vorak's shot catching her in the side, burning through already damaged ribs. She went down. Jace was there instantly, pressing hands to the wound, while returning fire one-handed at the fighters pouring through the entrance. The upload display flashed green. 100%, transmission complete. And then the cavalry arrived. Transport ships dropped from the sky, Loyalist forces descending on the relay station in overwhelming numbers. High Commander Zathira had received the evidence and mobilized immediately. Vorak's fighters threw down weapons as they realized the coup had failed. Zathira entered the station like a force of nature, her patterns dim but commanding. She surveyed the carnage, Vorak bleeding on the floor, Ixara cradled in Jace's arms, the evidence still streaming on repeat across every display. Her single functioning eye fixed on Ixara. "You invoked the bond oath." "I did, High Commander." "For a human, the first in 300 years." "Yes." Zathira was quiet for a long moment, her gaze shifting to Jace where he held pressure on Ixara's wound, his hands steady despite obvious exhaustion. When she spoke again, her tone was carefully neutral. "The evidence you transmitted changes much. Perhaps old certainties require examination in light of new truths." She gestured to her medics. "See to the Sentinel, and her, bonded." The word hung in the air, not quite approval, but not condemnation either. Recognition, at least, a possibility. The medics worked with efficient precision, stabilizing Ixara for transport. Jace refused to leave her side, and nobody tried to make him. As they lifted her onto the medical stretcher, her good hand found his and held tight. "Don't you dare die on me now," he said. Her patterns pulsed weak but steady, not acceptable behavior for someone who just bonded. "Damn right it isn't." 6 weeks later, Jace stood on a balcony overlooking the capital city of Velith 9, the first human granted provisional residency in 3 centuries. His ribs had healed, his leg was back to full strength, and the scars added to his collection felt earned rather than inflicted. Behind him, Ixara emerged from the council chambers, her arm still in a support brace, but her patterns bright and strong. The council had voted to establish a cultural liaison program, with Ixara and Jace as the first ambassadors. It was provisional, controversial, and opposed by nearly half the Dominion. It was also a start. She moved to stand beside him, her tail finding his wrist in the gesture that had become their private language. Below them, Cathara citizens went about their lives, some looking up at the balcony with curiosity, others with hostility. Change would be slow, trust slower still. But when Ixara's hand found his, when her patterns pulsed soft amber in the afternoon light, Jace understood what they'd really won. Not acceptance from everyone, not an end to centuries of division. Just the chance to prove that bridges could be built, that bonds could transcend fear, that love could be the ultimate act of rebellion against those who profited from hate. Her forehead touched his, and in the warmth of contact, in the pulse of her patterns matching his heartbeat, they found what they'd been searching for all along. Home,